What's up, nosy bitches? We're back. Today is day 8 of the George Wagner trial. Yes, I look like shit. No, it will not be improving. I've been decorating my house for fall. Finally, there's a little bit of it back there. So I look like shit. That's what it is. All right, today started out pretty mundane, pretty ballistic-y, pretty boring, going over all the scenes with Todd Fortner. Not all the scenes. We went over the scene of Frankie and Hannah Hazel's house. Pretty interesting because apparently I missed it when we went over it the first time. Sorry, I'm using the camera to fix my hair because it looks like shit. Not that I haven't done that every other day. But then after lunch, this shit went off the rails. Like, real fucking quick. So, let's get into today. We'll go over the morning and then we'll get into the shit show that was this afternoon. I have a few more pictures today. This is the living room of Frankie and Hannah Hazel's house. And I mean, I'm not judging the dead or anything. But what the fuck? Here's their spare bedroom where the open window was that we talked about yesterday. They ultimately decided that that was most likely not an entry point. But they did discuss it yesterday. It kind of felt like a red herring, honestly, which was weird because the prosecution brought it up. But anyway, they were hatching baby chicks in here. That is a chicken incubator. Yeah. There is the open window. There's a pack and play laying next to chicken feed for the indoor baby chickens. And we obviously didn't get to see the inside of the room, but there was also an incubator in there. They really like chickens, apparently. Now, you're going to have to squint to look at this because it's just small. I want you to look at the clutter walking down this hallway. This whole house basically just had pathways through it. And I don't understand. This is the laundry room and the kitchen. Like, I understand you have two very young children. But how the fuck are you functioning in this? How are you functioning in this? And I mean, that's irrelevant. I mean, the fact is, that's irrelevant as hell. It literally doesn't matter. But I could barely pay attention for the clutter that I was looking at. It was insane. So in the afternoon, I'm going to skip over the shit show. We'll get into that in the next one. But in the afternoon, we talked to Dr. Karen Luman again. This morning we heard from Todd Fortner. Both of these people before were filmed in audio. They were filmed in audio today as well, excuse me. We didn't learn a ton today from Todd Fortner. There was a lot of evidence that he thought he had, but it wasn't really. Go to part 2. We'll discuss the shit show that was this afternoon. So there were a lot of objections from the defense today. The defense has had an ongoing objection for the last few days. For the pictures that are being shown to the jury. The defense thinks that it's overkill and that the jury is upset. The judge said that he has been watching the jury and that no one has reacted. The defense said they saw someone react yesterday. No one in the jury would own up to being upset. And yesterday, I guess a couple of family members left. But, I mean, the family members, I wouldn't want to see that either. Now, that being said, today was graphic as fuck. Graphic as fuck. All right, before I get into the legal shit show, we're going to go over the autopsy results that Dr. Karen Luman went over with us again today. Starting off with the autopsy of Hannah Gilley. I'm pretty sure Hannah's family was in attendance today. There was a line of men sitting in the front row that I did not recognize. I'm pretty sure that is Hannah Gilley's family. This is Hannah Hazel. She only had gunshots to the head, and she had a total of 5 of them. She was laying in bed next to her fiance, Frankie. Her right breast was exposed in a nursing bra because she was breastfeeding her 6-month-old son. Was this Ruger? Yes, this was Ruger. So she was breastfeeding baby Ruger, and she had smears of blood on her, and there was a lot of blood everywhere, obviously. And we've maybe seen, if you're nosy and Googled it, the pictures of baby Ruger covered in blood. She did have smear marks on her. The defense kind of objected to that word, and I don't know what blood movement, I think, is what they ultimately settled on, where basically the baby had been moving against her and Frankie after they had been shot. The first bullet went through her left eye, rendering her immediately unconscious. Lumen cannot say for sure whether Hannah Hazel was awake or asleep because it did not puncture her upper eyelid, just her lower one. So she either was awake, or some people sleep with their eyes slightly open and it hit just right to where it didn't get her upper eyelid. Dr. Lumen said she is incredibly familiar with 22 caliber weapons, working in Cincinnati, and that it was a 22 caliber gun, but she could not tell if it was a handgun or a rifle. And I guess in 22 rifles, they do make an LR bullet that has extra gunpowder in it that is made for a long rifle. Head on over to part 3. All right, welcome back to part 3. So Dr. Karen Lumen testified that 4 of the bullets that she located inside Hannah Hazel's head. God, that sounds awful. And I cannot imagine seeing this. And that's the other thing. There were pictures of all of this that were being shown repeatedly. And by the time they got to this point, shit had gone so far off the rails and was such a clusterfuck. I cannot imagine what these families felt. She had 4 bullet wounds that did not have exit wounds, and a 5th had a partial on the back of her head. There were no illegal substances in her or Frankie's systems. There was a small amount of alcohol, like a 0.01, which 0.08 is the legal limit. However, Dr. Lumen said that the body can produce alcohol during decomposition. Of course, she concluded that her death was death by multiple gunshot wounds. Moving on to Clarence Frankie Roden. His autopsy was conducted on Sunday. Hannah's was on Saturday, the same day that they arrived. Frankie did have slight more decomposition potentially, but he was also in the cooler for an extra day. Dr. Lumen said that Frankie had been shot 3 times. I believe all 3 were in the head, and he had raccoon eyes, which were 2 black eyes, basically meaning that there was an injury right behind the eyes, causing the blood to pool behind the skin. Frankie was lying flat on his back and had his arm lying above his head laying to the right. He was shot in his left temple, so the one that was exposed, by his left ear, and once in his cheek. So all 3 were lodged inside his head and did not have exit wounds. Again, that sounds terrible. And of course, his cause of death was also multiple gunshot wounds. Dr. Lumen did talk about the lividity that was present and different signs that could date basically how long they had been dead. And it fell within range of 11 p.m. the night before, which has been the operating time that they've been going on. Sorry, I had to yawn. And 7:30 a.m. the next day when Bobby Joe Manley discovered the bodies at Chris Sr.'s house, and immediately after discovered the bodies at Frankie's house. Another random thing today, Fortner did spend a good amount of time talking about footprints that were found in the kitchen of Frankie's house. I don't know if these are going to amount to anything, but it was a long discussion. So head over to part 4. We'll wrap this up. All right, welcome back, part 4. So I mentioned that the defense has had an ongoing objection for the last several days about the amount of pictures being shown, the content of the photos being horrific, for lack of a better word. And it's been brought up every so often. They've made sure that we knew that they had a continuing objection. It was, of course, overruled, and the prosecution continued. Well, today after lunch, they came out swinging. Before the jury was brought in, the defense attorney, John Parker, he made the motion for a mistrial. He made the motion based on the fact that he says the jury was being continuously and overly exposed to graphic crime scenes and autopsy photos. John Parker said that it basically was overkill, that these pictures were being shown on 3 large monitors in the courtroom, and were being shown over and over with the sole purpose to evoke anger out of the jury. The state, Angela Canepa, argued back that this was all to lay out the details of the crime scene so that later on, when Jake Wagner testifies, it is to make him look credible for what he says and that everything will make sense and come full circle, quote unquote. Randy Deering denied the defense's motion, but this went on for like 5 minutes. They had to ultimately approach the bench. They were actively arguing with each other in the courtroom, and we were, of course, muted for several minutes while they were approaching the bench, talking this out. All right, so here's where things got bad. I'm just going to read this from the Scioto Valley Guardian because they have some insight from one of their legal analysts on here. So this might take the rest of the video, and then I'll get into my commentary at the last one. Prosecutor Angela Canepa had a stack of gruesome photos with her at the podium of victim Hannah Hazel Gilley. The photos were from an autopsy of the young woman. On the stand was Dr. Karen Luman, who conducted the examinations in 2016. Canepa went over more than a dozen photos of Gilley's body being cut open by Luman. On numerous occasions, photos flashed on the screens that were not meant to be displayed in the gallery as a fellow prosecutor, Andy Wilson, worked a computer to display the exhibits. Canepa and Wilson went back and forth on a dozen occasions, fumbling through photos and passing them back and forth like they were trading Pokemon cards. I didn't say that. That's in this article. In more instances than one, the photos were exposed to the family in multiple exchanges. The family of the Rodham victim sat behind the prosecutors and became vividly emotional while members of the jury would look away from the screens. At one point, Canepa told Luman, "I'm sorry, I can't find the hand," referring to a picture of Hannah Gilley's hand during her autopsy. Head on over to the last part. I'll finish this statement up and then we'll comment on it. Part 5, final part for today. So I'm continuing reading what the Scioto Valley Guardian has written today. We are getting into the finishing part of the day and what their legal analyst had to say. Before the afternoon break, defense attorney John Parker spoke up to the judge and said that the state was wasting time going over unnecessary evidence and that it had nothing to do with the accusation of who killed who, and that it simply was not needed because the defense does not object to the evidence in question. And he did make a point of pointing out they are not objecting to the fact that this was a murder that was committed. They are not objecting to that. They are only objecting to what relevance this has against George IV. Of course, the prosecution, Angela Wagner, replied and said that the relevance is that this is building credibility for Jake Wagner so that when he does testify, he will explain these crime scenes and he will explain how they were shot and how they were found. And then he is going to say that George Wagner was with him and that they are establishing all this to establish that Jake Wagner is telling the truth about the crime in general so that he would also have credibility when he says that George Wagner IV was with him, which I understand. Attorney Tim Smith, who is a Guardian legal analyst, said, quote, "I have sat on several death penalty cases, and this by far is the worst job a prosecution has ever done in any case, let alone in a case that was billed as Ohio's worst and most expensive homicide. The state is fumbling like the worst NFL team in the league." I mean, you ain't got to call the Bengals up till 2020 out like that, but all right, whatever. Now, that was pretty much the end of today, and this thing this afternoon, not only were they handing over the wrong photos, they were showing the wrong photos. Whoever was sitting on the laptop this morning was Rob Junk. This afternoon was Andy Wilson, was showing all the wrong pictures. There were long stretches where they were having to sit and figure something out. There was a monitor that kept turning off and on. Then when that one got fixed, there was another one that kept turning off and on. It was honestly just kind of a mess today. The defense was pissed. And to be fair, I can 100% see why they were pissed. And I'm kind of taking back what I said about Angela Canepa being a good prosecutor for this, because what the fuck are you doing? This is literally the worst homicide in the state of Ohio's history, and it's the most expensive trial that we have done so far. This has taken 6 years. Why is she the one in charge of this? You could have brought in any special prosecutor, and she is fumbling this. Come back tomorrow. We'll see what a shit show it is then. The appearance has greatly declined because I finished cleaning my house, but they actually did, and I have a couple of pictures. This picture was taken, I believe, by the Cincinnati Enquirer. This is at the funeral of Gary Roden. I believe this is in Greenup, Kentucky. Don't quote me on that, but one of them had a funeral in Greenup, Kentucky. But they do point out, here's Billy Wagner, Jake Wagner, and George Wagner is back here behind this person. I don't know who that is, and I don't know who this is. I don't know if they attended any of the other funerals, but I do know that they attended this one. Correction, I only have one picture. I've seen a different one, but I can't find it on the internet right now. But they did attend at least Gary Roden's funeral, and there were rumors that people saw them at other funerals as well.